Have you noticed how the left has sort of like monopolized the minority vote, and yet minorities, the situation of minorities is not improving? You see this in urban centers where the minorities are the dominant demographic in the big cities in the Western democracies. And these minorities, they all tend to vote in bloc. They all tend to vote 90% for the left-wing parties, right? And so the left-wing parties dominate these urban centers, and yet these urban centers are pigsties in some cases, right? They're complete disasters. And they certainly do not help the minority population. On the contrary, it's like in these great urban centers, things are getting worse all the time. This isn't an accident. This is not an accident. The left learned a lesson from supporting the working class. And more to the point, the left learned the lesson that if they actually help a group of people who politically supports them, that group of people will eventually betray them, like the working classes did. See, the working classes, they used to vote for the left. The poor working classes, the factory workers and whatnot, they used to vote en bloc for the left-wing parties. And what happened? As the economy improved, as the pay of the working classes improved, they started becoming more and more conservative. Of course, because see, if you have absolutely nothing, right? You have $0 in your bank account, you're flat broke. Of course you don't care if somebody else is taxed, because it's not going to affect you, because you don't have anything to tax, right? So if you're poor, if you're flat broke, you're like, sure, tax the rich, I don't care. Tax the middle classes, I don't care. But once you become middle class, and more to the point, once you see that your children could potentially rise up into the upper middle classes or even the upper classes, they might even become wealthy. You might even become wealthy. Well, then you don't want to pay that much tax now, do you? You become a lot more conservative. You become a lot more conservative naturally, and it's not just an issue of taxation, it's an issue of conservatism overall, because if things are going good for you, you don't want to rock the boat, you want to keep on going good, right? Yeah! And that's what happened to the working classes in the 20th century, especially the late 20th century, starting with the deregulation of the economies in the very late 70s, early 80s, under Margaret Thatcher and François Mitterrand and Ronald Reagan. See, the working classes started to rise up, they started to make more money. And of course they became more conservative and they started voting conservative. Back before 1979, back in the mid-70s and earlier, the idea of a conservative government controlling any one of the big Western democracies was considered absurd. Everybody knew that conservatism was sort of like dead. But as the economies improved because of deregulation, as more people became wealthier, they became more conservative. As the working classes started doing better, they became more conservative. And they abandoned the left-wing parties. And the left-wing parties never forgot that lesson. Oh no, they never did. Because they saw it. They lived through it. They saw how election after election would be lost because the working classes, their former allies, well, they become more conservative because their lot was better. The situation of the working classes, by improving, by actually fulfilling the dreams that so many left-wing politicians had dangled in front of them, right? They abandoned the left-wing parties. And the left-wing never forgot that, never forgave the working class this betrayal. Oh no. The left-wing parties tried to adjust, especially during the 90s with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. They essentially pivoted and basically gaining conservative economic programs in order to gain back the working class vote. But quite frankly, they didn't succeed. But they realized that there was another vote that they could get, a vote that also would vote en bloc like the working classes used to. and that was the minority vote. Yeah, the minorities all voted in bloc for various reasons. I mean, each minority group would vote in bloc for different reasons. It's not really important for this video, but the point is that each of them would vote 90% for the same candidate, for the left-wing candidate, for the candidate that would talk to the minorities. And what did the candidates do to the minorities? I mean, how did they speak to them? Oh, very simple. They spoke to them of resentment. See? They spoke to them of their misery and resentment of being in a new country and saying that all the problems that they were facing were not the natural problems that any minority group faces when it moves to a new country. To a new country, a new culture, a new environment. No, no, no. They didn't say that this was normal and that the minorities had to adjust to this new environment. Nuh-uh. They said that the minorities were suffering racism. Yeah, it's the white guy who did it. The white guy's racism. That's why the minorities are suffering. Yeah. I've moved to several different countries in my life, and I've been exposed to new cultures that I've had to adapt to, and it's not an easy process. It's very, very difficult. And in my own case, I wanted to move to these different countries. I moved to France, I moved to Germany, I moved to the UK, now in Holland. And each one of these is a culture shock. Of course it is, and it's difficult. And I wanted to go to these different cultures. I wanted to adapt and learn and become a member of these societies, okay? And of course, I found it difficult. So imagine a minority who is forced to go because of either political problems or, more likely than not, economic problems. Economic problems in their home countries in Central and South America or the Middle East or Africa or wherever. They are forced to leave their homes and go to a strange land. And they get to that strange land, and of course it's very, very difficult. It's very, very different. And what do? They feel resentment and anger and frustration because it's hard to learn the new culture, the new way of doing things. And then all of a sudden, this party comes along. The Labour Party, the Democratic Party, the whatever party, the left-wing party. And they all tell the minority that it's not their fault that they're having a hard time adapting. No, it's the white man's fault. And they should vote for the left-wing party because the left-wing party is going to stick it to the white man, the racist white man. That's what they do. That's what they do. They blame the white guy. And of course, that's only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is that not only are they going to blame the white guy so that they cement the support of the minority, they're going to make sure that no policy is implemented that will actually help minorities. Of course not. Any policy that actually helps minorities would mean that those minorities are going to stop voting for the left-wing party and start voting conservative. Because like everybody knows, as your situation improves, you become more and more conservative. Look at Asians. You don't believe me? Fine, don't believe me, but look at Asians. Look at East Asians in the Western democracies. Yeah, they might say that they're liberal, whatnot, just to, go along to get along kind of thing. But who are they actually voting for? They are voting for the conservatives. Because a lot of these Asians, East Asians, South Asians, they're doing very well in the Western democracies. They're doing very well, and so they start becoming more conservative. They start voting conservative. They start abandoning the left-wing parties. You see? And that's proof. That's all the proof you need that what I'm telling you is more or less on the ball. What about the other minorities? No, you got to keep them down. You got to keep them down. Keep them down. When they try to climb, when they put their fingertips on the ledge to go up, you got to stomp on those fingertips. You got to stomp on them and put them down. Because that's the only way that they're going to keep on voting for the right party, the left-wing parties. Because after all, these left-wing parties, see, they want power. They don't want to improve the lot of the people. They want power. Well, frankly, all politicians are like that, yeah? But the left in particular. Because in the conservative side of the equation, see, people who are naturally conservative, what do they tend to do? The best and the brightest of the conservatives. They tend to go into private enterprise, yeah. They go into business for themselves or they join a company. They're in the private sector. They don't want to be politicians. No, the best and the brightest realize that power is where the money's at. And where's the money? In the private sector. But the left, They want power too, just as the best and the brightest of the right-wing side want power. But they see power as emanating from the state, and so they become politicians. They get into politics, and what do they use their political positions to do? To improve the lot of people so that they will stop voting for the left-wing candidate? Of course not. No. They go into politics to enrich themselves, enrich their families, enrich their cronies, and keep on stomping on the fingertips of the minorities who are trying to rise. You who are a minority watching this video, understand the left-wing parties don't want to help you. Yeah, they only want to enrich themselves. And just look at all the left-wingers, the left-wing politicians, look how they have enriched themselves. Jeremy Corbyn is worth something like £5 million. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, it was worth like over $100 million, and she's only ever been a politician her entire professional life. How the fuck did that happen, huh? And look at the Biden family, for crying out loud. They're in the middle of this whole impeachment Ukrainian nonsense. And it's really about the fact that old Joe Biden made sure that his idiot son, Hunter, got this sweet gig for $50,000 a month, for crying out loud, to do nothing, a no-show job. Yeah. They're all cronies. I mean, let's not even talk about Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative, which was basically a pay-for-play scheme whereby foreign governments would give the Clintons boatloads of cash on the assumption that eventually Hillary Clinton would become president. The day after she lost the election of 2016, 95% of her donor base evaporated. Yes, that's the truth. And look it up. You don't believe me? Look it up. Google it. It's out there. All these left-wing politicians, they are corrupt as sin. They want to enrich themselves, enrich their families, enrich their cronies, pay off the people, sprinkle the money around to their whole machinery so that it props them up. And what? What are they going to do to the minorities? You who are a minority, what do you think they're going to do to you? They're going to fuck you, because they know that if they actually help you, you'll do what the working classes did, the white working classes did before you, which is abandon these corrupt bastards. Abandon them. And they can't have that. Because if you, minority, you abandon these left-wing politicians, and they can't steal. That's what they're all about, for crying out loud. Again, if you don't believe me, look at the evidence. Google any high-profile left-wing name. Any high-profile left-wing politician who's been a career politician. Look how rich they are. They are all rich, rich, rich. Not the millions, the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions of dollars, each and every one of them. And that's the nature of their program, the nature of their paradigm. They don't want to help minorities. Look at every minority city, every left-wing controlled city. It's a fucking disaster. And you, minority, you listen to me and you say that, CRP is this conservative pig, blah, blah, blah. He's a bigot, he's an anti-Semite, he's a racist, he's a this, a that, a that. Fine. Fine. Okay, yeah, I'm all those things, but am I wrong? Yeah, that's the question. Am I wrong? No, I'm not. You don't like it? Fuck you. Your problem, not mine. I'm right about this thing. And anybody with just a little bit of common sense recognizes that this is the truth. You who are a minority, you who support a left-wing candidate, a left-wing politician, that politician will never help you. No, on the contrary, he will make sure to keep you down. He will be sure to gut your schools so that your children don't gain any reasonable education to advance in the world. He will make sure that any kind of private enterprise will not put its factory or its offices in your district where you could find a gainful employment. No, he will make sure that you are kept down on the farm, down on the plantation like a good slave. Yeah, a good voting slave. And he will feed your resentment. That's the thing. These left-wing politicians will feed your resentment. They will chuck coal into it and keep it burning bright. Chucking coal, chucking resentment, talking about racism, talking about sexism, talking about the white privilege and all kinds of nonsense that doesn't make any sense at all. It's completely contradictory, all in order to keep you angry. Angry so that you don't realize what's going on. If you think that you're so smart, if you think that I'm fooling you somehow, why don't you look at the politicians who represent you? Look what they're saying, look what they're doing, and look at their bank accounts.